are with political negotiations, or how do you see that working out?
Eric Schmidt with the New York groups were reaching out to Al-Qaeda, and that's how they became so much more pretty much under the radar of counterterrorism specialists around the world. And if so, what is it? And if either one of the other panelists have any views on that, that would be great. Thank you.
Who wants to start?
I'll take Liz's question. First of all, one reason that we're so well, there's two reasons why we're particularly concerned about Iran's presence in Syria beyond the tendency that we have seen in country after country to subvert the institutions of normal power. Now, we're no fans, as you know, of the particular government that right now is running Syria under any understanding of national sovereignty. We see the Iranians not as advanced as in several other places trying to take that upon themselves. Secondly, they want to say of the Assad government, they have also moved in not rocket systems, drones, and have threatened Israel. In fact, they were striking. And should withdraw step by supported by that has leads to repeated use of chemical weapons, to either deliberately or by accident creating Daesh and introducing Iranian power projection into the middle of the Middle East. For all of these reasons, we think that we'll be able to maintain our policy of essentially putting Syria in the pariah category until it starts meeting these criteria. They involve 2254. They involve the chemical weapons regime that they have violated blatantly, and they're still violating in various ways, and they involve Iran. That's a choice that Syria and its sponsors, and without these sponsors, as you know better than most, that country would have fallen a long time ago. Russia and Iran have to make decisions on what kind of a Syria they want in the future. As I said earlier, Assad is sitting on top of 60% of the territory with only half of his population, and many of those aren't too happy being under him. And he's got 5 foreign armies or air forces in or over his territory, only 2 of which are friendly. Not a good situation for him.
Okay, and Sri Lanka, Edmund.
Yeah, the Sri Lanka question. Well, first of all, there's no connection that I'm aware of between the Sri Lanka attacks and Al-Qaeda. We assess that the Sri Lanka attacks were ISIL-inspired. The ringleader and also one of the people who blew himself up in the process of the attacks, Zahran, was a charismatic local Sri Lankan. He was the self-proclaimed Amir of ISIL in Sri Lanka, but, you know, self-proclaimed is an important qualification there. He was also a retailer of ISIL propaganda in Sri Lanka. When you look at the question of what exactly did these attacks represent, you could go from one sort of one extreme would be a directed attack from ISIL core. The other extreme would be a purely local affair, purely inspired. And in between that, you've got various stages. You could have directed from another ISIL hub, or you could then have facilitated or financed from outside, but not directed. So it's absolutely clear that ISIL core had no prior knowledge of these attacks. There were external connections to the attackers, and Zahran himself had external connections, but it is not clear that that amounted either to taking any kind of instructions or facilitation from outside. The finance, I think we're very clear, was entirely domestically generated. As you'll be aware, there were 2 brothers from a wealthy family who provided the local finance. So it leads to a conclusion that what this is at least is a particularly troubling and very, very high impact inspired attack, and of course very readily claimed by ISIL, and of course the encouragement then for others to do the same. And that seems to have been Zahran's intent, that he was happy, prepared to have the group more or less self-destruct in pursuit of such a high impact that it would then have ramifications afterwards. I think that was what he was aiming for. But I would just caution that some of the external connections have not yet been fully bottomed out, so it would be premature to say that there was definitely no external facilitation.
This all sounds right to me, including the caution at the end.
Jess?
No, I agree. Terrorists are notorious opportunists, and although there was a lot of ISIL branding, that lends them a huge amount of legitimacy and international recognition instantly, and conversely, of course, Daesh to do the same. And Baghdadi mentioning them in the video and mentioning the smaller affiliates is actually a really interesting move on how they're going to maybe be reaching out to those smaller affiliates post kind of collapse of the so-called caliphate, and leaning into those newer areas.
Absolutely. So on that note, I think I'll start drawing things to an on-time close, which is, I think, a first for me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. I want to make a special thanks to my three panelists here for what I think has been an excellent discussion. I think we pretty much depleted all of the questions in the audience. Before we go, I just want to highlight to people here that we've got an event in a couple days on Iraq, Iraq's crisis of governance after the Basra protests. That's on June the 6th. On June the 4th, which I gather is next week, we have Sam Dagher, the former Wall Street Journal reporter in Damascus, who's coming here to discuss his new book, Assad or We Burn the Country. I think both events will be a must attend for many of you, because the subjects we've discussed today very much overlap. So with that, thank you again to my panelists. Thank you for you for coming, and please come back to our events in the future. Thank you.